What's going on, people? Welcome back to VEVE Investments. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing my biggest mistakes I've ever made on the VEVE platform. And I'll be honest with you, this video is a little difficult for me to make. I was kind of itching myself, being like, what on earth was I doing back in the day? But obviously, the purpose behind this video is so that you guys don't make the same mistakes that I did. So if you enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to make fun of me in the comment section down below for the stupid decisions I've made. Any engagement helps, I guess. And without further ado, guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alright, so kicking it off, I know some people are going to be making fun of me for this one. We're gonna start off with Todd Batman here. So I did have the opportunity of purchasing him in the secondary market at 80, 120, 180 gems. I remember multiple times looking at these prices in the secondary market when I was trying to decide what to buy. Now, this is me being brutally honest. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. I'm sure some will agree. I looked at it and was like, yeah, this is ugly. I did not like the look of it. This is before I knew who Todd McFarlane actually was. And this is before I knew that this was the first piece on the app. Now, you know, if I knew both of those things in the moment, of course I would have picked it up. I think I ended up choosing Superman, picked it up for 105 gems, which was still a good, you know, decision at the end of the day. But, yeah, I just looked at the piece. I didn't like the way that it looked. And for anyone who watched my VEVE collection video, you guys know that, you know, what I've been purchasing on the app are things that I like. So I hope it didn't piss off anyone there. But yeah, that's what happened there. And do I regret it? Absolutely. Next up, we got the rare Ultraman. Now, this was the first piece I actually ever purchased on VEVE, and I actually ended up selling it early to participate in a specific drop, and that drop was the Star Trek Enterprise. So I can't fully remember exactly what I sold the piece for, but I remember the drop for the Enterprise was 130 gems. I actually don't have the piece anymore. I need to pick it back up, but I sold it for, I think it was 650, and I flipped that over into some pieces that I ended up stacking. Now, the main reason I regret this one is because what ended up happening in the first major bull run on the platform was the Ultraman piece that you're looking on screen right now. I think hit an all-time high of around 3,500 gems. The Enterprise hit an all-time high of around 1,100, 1,200. So for that reason, on top of the fact that this was the first piece I ever purchased and I got rid of it early, I do wish I stuck with the Ultraman piece. Now, another thing I do want to add with this one here, and I see it happening often on the platform now, the biggest lesson I learned from this is not to sell older pieces for newer pieces. If Pokemon drops and it's the first Pokemon drop, then, you know, that might be a different circumstance. But in this case, you know, selling a Season 1 collectible, right, because that is exactly what this is, for an... Hello, Joe speaking. Hello? Yeah, wrong number. Or an older piece probably isn't the best bet, and it's something that I always try to remind myself often now on the app. Keeping in mind, and I talked about this in a previous video, that everything dropping on VEVE isn't necessarily going to shoot to the moon and hit insane prices. It's simply a numbers game. Next, this is a very big one for me, and again, some people are going to be smacking their palms on their forehead right now, but I didn't actually even try going for the secret rare Spider-Man. I'm for some reason having a little trouble recollecting exactly what happened on this drop. I have the common Spider-Man and it says that I paid 45 for it. It dropped for 40. I want to say I went for the rare on the drop, and the reason I did this was because the ultra rare and the secret rare at the time were out of my price range. It just wasn't a smart financial decision for me. And for those wondering, you know, okay, well, why did you include this on the list? If it wasn't a smart financial decision for you in the moment, then, you know, why do you regret that? And the reason why is because if I knew, and obviously this would be for anyone, you can't time the market, but if I knew that this piece was going to hit the price that it did as soon as it did, in the moment I fully understood the potential of this piece, right? It's the #1 superhero in the world by far. But the thing I underestimated was the fact that it would hit the price level it did as soon as it did. And if I understood that or had a better idea that that was going to happen, I would have figured out a way to make it work, whether it was selling duplicates in my collection, whether it was, you know, selling physical merchandise from an older business I used to run. I would have made it work. There's a certain type of person that's going to understand this when I say it, but if you want to win, you will, because you're going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And in this case, this piece dropped for 400 gems. I didn't have that gem balance in my wallet, but I would have figured out a way to make that happen if I understood how fast this piece would gain traction. And the same is going to apply for our next example here. Oh my gosh. Walt and Mickey. So for those who remember when VEVE and Disney started dropping golden moments on the app. They did a full first week of golden moments in celebration of their Disney Plus Day. I went for all of the golden moments drops. I didn't get any of them on drop. And I remember Walt and Mickey was the last one. It dropped for 333 gems. And again, same as the Secret Rare Spider-Man, I just financially was not in a position where it would have been a smart decision for me to add those gem balances in my wallet. But again, I would have figured out how to make it happen. The all-time high for this piece is, I think, around 60,000 gems. If I understood how fast this piece was going to gain traction, just like the Secret Rare Spider-Man, I would have figured out a way to get the 333 into my account. And some people might be watching this being like, that's not necessarily a smart decision. And to those people I say, it absolutely is when you can flip 333 gems into 50,000. Short, simple, and sweet. Now the piece has dropped all the way down to, 3,700 gems, somewhere around there right now. But of course, I would have much rather picked it up for 333 as opposed to the floor price now. So the moral of the story, guys, with the Secret Rare Spider-Man and the Walt and Mickey drop, for me at least, is don't sleep on the big drops. There was a part of me in both of these instances where I was like, maybe I could pick it up on the secondary market down the line, but don't cross your fingers and hope for big pieces like this. And that's definitely a mistake that I've made and I've learned from as a result. Next up, I've talked about this one on the channel before. Oh gosh, another big one for me. I actually ended up getting the Darth Vader reservation and canceling the reservation on drop. Now, the reason I did this, for anyone wondering, is because this was a point in time where demand was clearly dropping on the app, and the world economy was just going into a whole whirlwind. This is when the Russia-Ukraine incident started. I'm not a political guy, so I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff right now, but my point is there was a bunch of red lights flashing for me. A couple other red lights for me were the fact that, we had 2 other Star Wars drops happen that same week. The first one was the lightsaber drop with 75,000 editions at 60 gems apiece. That took roughly a week to sell out. And then we had the poster collection drop right after that. That dropped for a price of 40. I can't remember the exact edition size. I know it was in the 5 figures though, low 5 figures, and it didn't sell out. So when I looked at the Darth Vader drop, obviously I understood the notoriety of this character. I understand how big of a villain Darth Vader is. But having learned from my mistakes before, acting emotionally, as opposed to looking at the situation objectively, I looked at the Darth Vader drop and I said, okay, we have 30,000 plus editions here at 80 gems a piece. With the current global market and the current VEVE market, do I think it's going to sell out? And at the time, I did not think it was going to. So I got the reservation, I exited out of it, and before I could click buy now again, it was already sold out. So I was, despite the character, I was still a little surprised here. The common and uncommon did drop below retail at one point, but for those who don't know, the ultra rare was several thousand. And, looking back at that drop, would I have clicked buy now if I understood that the demand was truly as high as it was for this piece at the time? Absolutely. The loss that you would have taken if you got the common or the uncommon, 20 gems at most. But the potential if you scored the ultra rare was huge and still is. So I learned from my mistakes there. The next Star Wars drop, the Boba Fett drop, I actually picked up 2 on the drop. I didn't want to make the same mistake, and I scored the ultra rare. So worked out for me, panned out in the end. Anyone familiar with the concept of law of average, it worked out for me. Next, we got the MC #1 drop. I've talked about this a couple times on the channel, so we'll keep this one shorter, but I went for this on the drop. This was the first ever comic that dropped on VEVE. This was a point where you could just sit there and click buy now, buy now, buy now over and over and over again until it sold out. I only purchased 1 on the drop. I remember going over to the social feed right after and, seeing people pick up 30 or 40 of them. Now, biggest reason I regret this is because this was a point in time before I really started stacking pieces on the app and understood the true value or potential of doing that. If I put a few $100s aside for the drop, scored 20 of them, let's say, and out of those 20 got 1 secret rare or even 2, the price of that variant obviously went through the roof. But even if I didn't and just scored 20 commons, right? For anyone who doesn't know, this is the first ever Marvel comic to ever be created back in 1939. The physical pieces have gone for millions of dollars. The potential for this piece on VEVE is massive, and I do wish I capitalized on this opportunity much more. Now, this piece did drop below retail, the commons, in the secondary market afterwards as well. I think it dropped down to 3 or 4 gems. I picked up 2 more of them, so I have 3 in my collection total. But I do really regret not picking up more because in this case, only $7 a piece or even cheaper at times. Having 20 in the collection would have only been, a couple $100. Alright, so sticking with the topic of comics, this was the second ever comic dropped on VEVE right after Marvel Comics #1. And I actually ended up getting a sub 1000 mint number on drop. Now, I panic sold this during a time where I was trying to stack certain pieces on the app. This was actually right after the major bull run, so we started to see prices drop again. And considering the mint number, I ended up selling it above retail in order to flip it into multiple other pieces. Now, I am somebody who I will be creating a video on comics versus collectibles. I will openly admit that my knowledge behind comics isn't necessarily the greatest. I am somebody who is a little bit more interested on the collectible side of things. I do see more potential on that side. Comic people don't come after me, but that was part of the reason that influenced my decision at the time. The reason I regret it is because this is a comic where the physicals have sold for 6 figures. There's 60,000 editions on VEVE, and I had a sub 1000 mint. So in the future, that sub 1000 mint will likely be much more valuable than what I sold it for, but unfortunately it's something I got to deal with. Fun fact for you guys, there's actually an episode of Pawn Stars where somebody walked in and sold one of these. Next up, we got Throg. So I've talked about this on the channel as well. I FOMO'd into this piece. I learned a lot from this drop. So I went for the drop. The mint size for this drop was very scarce compared to the demand that was on the app at the time. And this was the first ever time that I experienced this, where you could go into the secondary market right after the drop to try and purchase it, and you could sit there for 30 minutes to an hour and still not get one. I believe this piece dropped for 50 gems. It went all the way up to what I purchased it at, in fact, actually a little bit higher. And for those who don't know, it's dropped all the way down to 10 gems. So literally a 12x loss currently for me. But the biggest lesson I learned from this is not to FOMO into prices. So I mentioned this in, I believe it was episode 3. So for anyone who hasn't watched that, I recommend it. I don't blame you. It was when I just started the channel. But I talked about how I never purchase collectibles in the secondary market right after drop. I wait for the secondary market to settle, and that can take a couple days. So a good example of this was actually the most recent droid drop for Star Wars. I went for the drop. I didn't get it. However, somebody that I knew did end up hitting the drop. And they texted me the day after asking if prices were going to keep going up. And I told them, I said, no, prices are going to settle. In the current market, I don't see these pieces shooting up in value anytime soon. And sure enough, at the time of him texting me, the piece was at 110 gems, and a couple days later dropped all the way down to 80. This is another thing that I constantly try to remind myself of. Take the emotion out of it. Look at the situation objectively. Do not FOMO into prices. Wait for things to settle, and then make your moves. This is the biggest probably regret that I have on the app right now, is I did not take profits, or enough profit, should I say, during the first major bull run. Now, I can openly admit that the first major bull run VEVE experienced on platform was the first time I had ever experienced something like that on the collectible side of things. So as I mentioned before, you can't time the market, but I didn't necessarily have the experience to go, okay, prices have hit their ceiling for now, take some profit, wait for prices to drop again, and reinvest those profits into many more collectibles than what I had before. This is my main priority on the app right now for next bull run. You know, I've seen screenshots of people who got Walton Mickey on drop and then sold it at the all-time high. And my God, for people who made that decision, good on ya. I respect stuff like that so much, because at the end of the day, you never really know if that $60,000 floor price is the ceiling, and it could have kept going up more. So that's definitely something I'm keeping my eye out for. When I had pieces like Superman that was at 10,000, or Givenchy Pride that hit, you know, I think it was 16,000, I really wish I took profit, and I'll tell you right now, this is not a mistake I'm going to make again. And last but not least, I mentioned this earlier in the video, so I'll keep it short here. I wish I started stacking sooner. So I picked up Superman at 105 gems. My God, if I put 1,000 gems into Superman, picked up, you know, 9 or 10 of them, I'd be laughing right now. Same thing with Givenchy Pride. I actually, again, speaking of FOMO with Throg, this was another drop where I FOMO'd in a little bit. I purchased the first one on the secondary market for 405 gems, and then it dropped down to 280. I could have waited for the market to settle, and I could have picked up multiples in this case. And then same with some of the most notable comics on the platform. I wish I stacked a lot more of these so that when prices did shoot up, I could have taken profit on some of the duplicates. All in all, this is again something that I am focusing on now. I've talked about how I'm stacking Pilly Fantasy. I got, you know, 14 or 15 of those. I've stacked Pride 2. which is the second NFT on the blockchain licensed by Givenchy. Anyone who tells me that that piece isn't going to go up, I kind of laugh, because you go onto Givenchy's website and you have a plain white t-shirt that's double the price of the second NFT ever licensed by them on the blockchain. So for me, there's just common sense involved there. When NFTs become much more mainstream, pieces like this are going to be extremely notable. So I'm not making this mistake again. I've made sure to stack pieces like that. Now that's going to conclude episode 21 of VEVE Investments, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys got a little laugh out of this video, and I hope you guys can relate to some extent, so I'm not the only one here. If you found the content helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what you guys want to see in future episodes. And as for episode 22, I'll catch you then.